Alec, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, President Cannon. That's very kind of you. Today we pause to honor our military veterans. They're the ones who really personify the Rotary motto of service above self. It's no accident that our military is labeled the Armed Services. So to help us honor our past and current veterans, we're fortunate to have as our program today retired Marine Corps Major General Burke Whitman. General Whitman is unusual. He was the CFO and CEO of 2 Fortune 500 companies before he was the commander of the 4th Marine Division and commander of all Marine Corps Reserve units. That happened because he was recalled to active duty, taking a leave of absence from his business responsibilities. He joined the Marine Corps after he graduated from the Harvard Business School. He has conducted 10 deployments, including 5 combat tours of duty, 1 in Bosnia, 2 in Iraq, and 2 in Afghanistan. He led the military advisory group charged with supporting the Afghanistan Ministry of Interior Forces, which comprised 1/2 of the Afghan National Security Forces. With all of his combat and business executive experience, then Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis selected him to serve in his office as the Defense Uniform Spokesman. He was involved in many of the international political events that have transpired over the last decade. I think he'll probably talk about some of those, and of course we'll be taking questions at the end. General Whitman has been the CEO of several companies: Health Management Associates, Triad Hospitals, Deerfield Healthcare, and Almost Family. And he's currently the CEO of the locally based Colmar Holdings, investing in enterprises committed to the common good. He is a local guy. He graduated from Lovett and gave the commencement address there in 2017. From Lovett, he went to Dartmouth College, where he played rugby, which is why my nose is bandaged today. Recently, the college awarded him its annual service award for the alumnus who has lifetime exemplified the ideals of service, college, and country. Having succeeded in business and military, he's also currently taking on the hardest challenge of all, the Master of Ministry degree for lay leadership. Oh, oops. I forgot to mention his most notable of all of his accomplishments. He was born at the U.S. Naval Hospital in Newport, Rhode Island. Please welcome with a virtual loud applause, a great example of service above self, General Burke Whitman.
Alec, thank you very much. As a son of a naval officer, it's an honor to be introduced by a career naval officer, and thank you for your service and your example too. And thank you, members of Rotary, for having one of these lunches every year for Veterans Day. I will tell you the bad news for you is, unlike Linda, I have never written a comedy show, and I don't think any talk that I've ever given set off electric fireworks that required the government to weigh in. But the good news for me is my heart is in this, and I really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk with you all about it, and really enjoyed, inspiring stories of Paulie and Linda, and I know all the great things that you all do as Rotary, so proud to be with you today. When we remember our veterans, as we're doing today, as we did last week in the holiday, we accomplish more than a thoughtful gesture of thanks, although that alone would probably be sufficient reason to celebrate. We actually strengthen our nation, and the logic is pretty simple. The U.S., for all of its flaws, is, in my mind, still the greatest experiment in social organization in the history of humanity. There are evil forces who would like to do us harm or destroy us, and I've encountered some of them. So defending this great experiment requires, among other things, a capable armed service. And Veterans Day and your general support of veterans helps build and preserve that vital armed service by recognizing veterans, which in turn encourages current and future generations to serve. So thank you to Rotary for your support on Veterans Day and really all through the year. I'm happy to report that your support is paying off. Over the past 4 decades, and especially since the tragedies of 9/11, The nation has recognized and supported veterans and service members in a way that has helped us fill the armed services with great people eager to make a difference. Today's force is a remarkable accomplishment as a nation for all of us. 6 valuable characteristics that I'm going to talk about here for a minute before I turn to veterans themselves, because they're worth celebrating. And that is that this force is all volunteer. It's very high quality. It's quite diverse. It's well led. It's apolitical. And I've run out of fingers, so I'll throw another one up here. It is trusted by the American people more than many other institutions. So let me spend really just a few minutes fleshing those 6 points out, then I'll turn to veterans. The members of your armed services are volunteers, all of them, because in 1973, after the Vietnam War draft ended, our nation decided to move to an all-volunteer force. Now, I will tell you, scholars were not sure at the time whether that was going to work, but it has, and really beyond expectations. To maintain our national peace and security, we estimate we need about 1.5 million active service members, plus another roughly 1 million reservists. And we have them, and we've continued to have them. And because these people have made this decision on their own, not being forced into it, they actually generally want to be there, at least for their 4-year enlistment. So they're highly motivated. Now, there are extra costs associated with this, and there are some looming threats to the viability of this all-volunteer force, and I can speak to some of those in the questions and answers if you'd like. Secondly, the members of your armed forces are high quality. Amazing statistic here. Only 25% of young Americans meet the basic physical, intellectual, and character standards and qualifications to join the military. And of course, for some services and special programs and officer programs, the standards are higher than that. So we're getting and continue to get very good people. Some scholars say that this is the most qualified, capable force that we've ever had. And I will tell you, it's not just their skills that makes them high quality. Your service members really do value and aspire to live by our core principles of honor, courage, and commitment. All 3 of those together: honor, courage, and commitment. And I'm certainly not saying that they are angels or superwomen or supermen. They're very, very human. Behind the honor is often great humility, driven by humbling experiences of lack of success over and over. And particularly behind the courage is very real fear in training situations and in combat that they never get over. They just have to push through. And I've got some stories I can share, depending on what y'all would like to go into in the questions and answers, that exemplify some of that, some that are kind of fun and amusing. Thirdly, the members of your armed services are diverse. And while we still have work to do, your military population is a pretty good representation of the nation as a whole. We're diverse, broadly speaking, in terms of, and I'll just rattle these off alphabetically: culture, education, ethnicity, geography, income, politics, race, religion, and so on. And military has become, over the last several decades in particular, a place where any American has an opportunity to make a difference and even to devote a career to that in a rewarding way. That's fair and equitable for the service members and their families, certainly, but it's also important for our nation, because when a military service reflects the nation, it reinforces the connection between the two, the sense of mutual respect, something that is vital for democracy. But I'll take it even further. The diversity within the military is important to our country for an even more profound reason. Diversity in the military makes a stronger American society as a whole. And let me just drill down into this for a moment. During one's time in uniform, every service member builds empathy with other Americans, forming lifelong relationships with people he or she would otherwise never even meet. And yet they're thrown in together, working together on missions and tasks that sometimes involve life and death. in training or in combat. This strengthens the service member's civic character. And ultimately, when the service member returns to civilian society, it strengthens our civic character as a nation. And we're safer for their service, but we're also stronger as a society. And I'll tell you parenthetically, this is off veteran topic, but on service topic, this profound benefit of a stronger society that comes from pulling people together from diverse backgrounds to work together is why I and a number of others favor the idea of requiring someday, I think we're ways away still, but someday requiring every able young person to do a period, even if it's a short period of national service. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily military service. That would be just one of many options. Others could include education, environment, healthcare, infrastructure, social work, really anything that the nation needs help with, that at the same time would create an opportunity for young people to be brought together from different backgrounds to work on these worthy causes, to work together for the common good. And then as they finish and go back out to society, they are more unified in loving their neighbor. So fourth, your armed services are well led. This is something I underappreciated when I entered the military. I kind of thought that, I would be sort of lending some great ability to this. And what I saw just awed me and continues to. The quality of the leadership is comparable to anything I've seen in my corporate executive and board work. Military services do a good job of identifying and developing leadership, and they demand the intellect, the character, and the physical ability. But maybe most importantly, the emphasis is on servant leadership. So it's a whole bent of leadership that is toward not just what the objective is, but what the people are underneath you who are having to carry that out, to really look after them, to look after their welfare. And we do it well. And I see it at every level. And our officer candidates in my service, they're screened not only for intellect and physical ability, but specifically for leadership ability. And a lot of them we determine are not really cut out for that. We sort of guide them to a different path rather than being an officer. Enlisted members are identified very early and put onto a career path if they show that leadership. And I will say at the highest level, just give you one example. My friend, General Joe Dunford, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 2015 to 2019 and was my boss in one of my combat tours in Afghanistan. He's a friend. He could easily have led any of the largest companies in the world and done it well. And fortunately for our national security, he chose to serve the nation. And there are many, many like him out there. This institutional ability to develop leaders is recognized externally. I spoke up at my old business school with the dean sitting right in the front row, and I went on a limb to say that while Harvard does a great job developing leaders, I said there's a place down the road in Quantico, Virginia, which is where we train and educate our Marine officers, that does it even better. And the dean, God bless him, who has studied and taught leadership, stood up and proclaimed, General Whitman is right. I've got some cherished stories about leadership and particularly servant leadership, again, that we can share depending on what questions I'd like to ask. Fifth, your armed service members are apolitical, and especially the senior officers. This is really important. Elected officials make the policy decisions. Military leaders advise the elected leaders and then carry out through military action whatever it is that they have decided to do. And we really do a good job of sticking to that role, to that limited role. I'll give you a couple of examples. Although I spent most of my military career as a commander of combat forces, my final assignment, as Alec mentioned, was with Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis at his request. When he resigned over a disagreement with the president on the president's new policy for Syria, the political leaders initially called the Pentagon and told them to have me, General Whitman, conduct a live global press conference to explain and defend the president's decision to say that Secretary Mattis was wrong and President Trump was right. I pushed back hard on this, not based on my opinion regarding the policy decision. In fact, I still don't think any of them know what my opinion about that is. I pushed back based on the principle that a uniform simply should not publicly promote, defend, or condemn a political policy decision. that a civilian political appointee should do that instead. The political leaders listened and eventually, after about a day, accepted my advice, and they stuck with it. And maybe most importantly here, the fellow generals and admirals all concurred with my decision. Another example, President Trump, when he was first elected, initially intended to replace my friend Joe Dunford as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs because President Obama had appointed him. But upon getting to know General Dunford, President Trump discerned quite correctly that he truly was entirely apolitical. So he kept him. And if you encounter senior leaders, y'all know Alec well, and he'll tell you the same thing. That was what he did. He executed policy, advised politics, but did not make it. And underlying all this heartfelt commitment to being apolitical is our oath of office. And this is a really great thing about our country. Our oath is to the Constitution. And for those of us who grew up in the United States, this seems sort of obvious and logical because we've always lived with it. But I'll tell you in the context of human history, this is a very recent and profoundly important development. Unlike the soldiers of other civilizations, past and even present now, our oaths are not to a person, a king, an emperor, or a president. They're not to a tribe or a religion or a political party. They're to a constitution, and that makes all the difference. During the Q&A, I'd be happy to talk about sort of some of the military views on the political situation right now, current members, future members, and that sort of thing, if you'd like. I'll be careful not to touch third rails when I do that. And finally, the sixth thing is that largely as a result of these other characteristics that I've described, your armed services are one of the nation's most trusted institutions. In an era of catastrophic declines in trust and respect for institutions of all kinds, a consistent exception has been the uniformed military. Over the past 3 decades, they have consistently enjoyed high approval and trust ratings of 80% or north by the American population. That's very important to maintain. So there you have it, a force that's all volunteer, quality, diverse, well-led, apolitical, and trusted, largely as a direct result of the continuing recognition and support that you and others across the country give to them and to our veterans. So let me turn now to our veterans before I wrap up here. A veteran is any person who has served honorably on active duty in the U.S. military. It's not just combat vets. In fact, fortunately, a lot of people don't realize this. Fortunately, the vast majority of service members never have to visit those horrors. Thank goodness. And it's not for those who died in service to the nation. We do this separately on the holiday of Memorial Day, which is the day that, in effect, we honor those who never got to be veterans. So Veterans Day is not about that, but I will, for the sake today of the 1 million Americans in our country's history who have died in service in uniform to our nation, I would like to pause briefly here for a moment of silence and prayer. I'll ask you for 10 seconds as I remember the 10 heroes under my battalion command in combat operations in Iraq in 2005 who didn't make it home with us. So 10 seconds, please. Yeah, thank you for that. So Veterans Day is for all of who served. There are 18 million veterans in the United States today, and we honor not just their service, but really their spirit and willingness to serve and sacrifice in this peculiar way to protect and defend. This is the land of the free, partly because of all of them. But it's also the land of the free because of you. You and I, as citizens, make the country stronger by honoring and supporting them. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'm happy to do it. Rotary epitomizes the human commitment to service above self, and it's fantastic that y'all include in that a recognition of veterans. If you are interested as individuals doing some additional things in support of veterans, either now or anytime in the future, I will offer here 4 possible lines of effort that you might consider. First, support a trustworthy veterans organization. There are lots of them out there. Do your research, make sure they're doing what you want them to be doing. But your money and time can help. We have veterans, old and young, even those coming out of this very capable modern force, who benefit enormously from the support that a number of these not-for-profits give. Secondly, hire a veteran. Or if you're not hiring, mentor one professionally or vocationally. Thirdly, thank a veteran or a service member for his or her service. Now, this one's kind of funny. It's become controversial in recent years in some circles because some veterans and service members say that this makes them uncomfortable because they don't know what to say back when someone says thank you for your service. I will tell you that about a year ago, sitting on a plane next to a young sailor, I heard the best answer or reply that I've ever heard. We're sitting in the plane, he's next to me, and a passenger walks by and leans over and says, "Thank you for your service." And the sailor replied, "Thank you for paying your taxes." I have used that a couple times since then. So thank you for paying your taxes. But don't worry about their potential discomfort. Believe me, when you thank them, it validates their sense of contributing to a greater cause. Word of that support travels from family to family, generation to generation, and reinforces their willingness, the willingness of others to serve in this peculiar way. And fourth, you can encourage young people who are potentially interested in service. I'm not saying push them, but if they express interest, let them explore it. It's definitely not for everybody. It's not for most, and that's okay. Our armed services don't need everybody right now, but we do need a few from each generation, and really particularly from each element of society. You all know people, this group knows people who have means and options to do a number of things sometimes, and we do need some of them. So if someone indicates an interest and has a sense of calling, support them through it. And I'm happy to do that too. And I don't push it. I just inform folks so they make a wise decision. And finally, just to wrap it up here, in addition to recognizing and supporting veterans, we can all take inspiration from their service to recommit ourselves to serve others with the same selfless spirit. You and I can, and you all do, serve others just as profoundly and impactfully with our own actions every day in whatever pursuits we undertake, personal, family, spiritual, civic, vocational, corporate. When we do that, when we do all such good works as God has prepared for us to walk in, we honor even further the service of our veterans. We, in a sense, pay it forward and, like them, make other people's lives better and our nation stronger. All of you in Rotary do this every day in your personal, professional, and civic endeavors. So for your service and for the opportunity to be with you here today to remember and celebrate the service of our veterans, thank you very much. And Alec, with that, I will turn it back over to you to see if there are any questions. And if not, I'll be happy to just tell a story or two.
Well, I'm going to ask you about a story or two. You brought up a lot of suggestions of things that we might want to discuss when your comments, which were very, very insightful, and thank you for those. But before I get into the ones you suggested, I think a lot of our members are well aware of what the stars on your shoulders mean, but your parachute insignia there for your qualification is probably not recognized as much. So for those of the rest of you, it's the one on top.
Yep.
What was it like? What was it like jumping out of your first jump out of an airplane?
Yeah, the veterans on the call who have done this will probably nod and say, "Oh yeah, I remember that fear." And even those of you who have jumped out of perfectly good airplanes in a civilian capacity, which I have not done, by the way. I think you're all crazy, but I think you may enjoy this. My first jump, I was down at Fort Benning, Georgia, right down the road. Marines and sailors go through there for our initial jump, and then we do some different kind of parachutes that we do within our service. But all the basic parachuting is training us down at Fort Benning. I was preparing to do my first jump, and it's a favorite story of mine, actually, Alec. I was the oldest member, the most senior member of the class, so I volunteered to jump first. And we're in an Air Force C-130. We're all strapped in, hooked up, ready to jump out. The door opens up, the loud wind noise going by. We're at about 3,000 feet, and we're seconds away from my jumping out of an airplane for the first time. And standing next to me is a young 17-year-old kid from North Carolina, Army private, who had never been in an airplane before. And so at the end of this day, if all went well, he would be one of the few people in the world who had taken off in an airplane but never landed in one. He looked up at me right before I got ready to jump, and panic in his face. You could just see it. He said, "Sir, are you scared?" And I looked over at him and with an air of confidence said, "Son, just follow this great training we've done over these past 3 weeks and you'll do great. Just follow me." And I jumped out into the void. Well, when I got down on the ground, I gathered up my parachute and ran over to see if he was okay. And he was fine. I said, "Son, you asked me up there if I was scared." Of course I was scared. I was scared out of my mind, about to jump out of an airplane for the first time. I just wasn't going to tell you that. I wanted you to jump. And he did jump. And in fact, that young man is now a veteran himself. And just, one little example of somebody who has fear and overcoming that fear. I also had a parachute not open one time, Alec. I'll save that for a future day. That was also a fearful moment, to look up and see that nothing was happening.
Well, did it hurt when you landed without the parachute?
Yes, it did. It eventually, I couldn't get the reserve out because I was all tangled up in the lines. So I spent about 30 seconds as I hurtled to the earth untangling this thing, and I got untangled, and it burst open about 100 feet or so from the ground. And so some of you may appreciate this. You're supposed to sort of hit the ground gently in kind of a banana-shaped roll, and you sort of gently do it. I hit so hard, I hit heel, head, and knocked myself out. I use that as my excuse when I do stupid things, by the way. I point out that I was knocked out in a parachute jump.
We're glad we're glad you're okay. A couple of questions here. You mentioned early in your comments that how well the all volunteer force has been doing, and I can attest to that. But you said that there are threats to the all volunteer force. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I sure can. And a number of people are spending time on this, so it's not lost on us. In fact, Alec, as you know, I'm still an advisor on a board of the Advisory Secretary of Defense. So this is one of our biggest topics right now, particularly for the presidential transition, regardless of what it is. We knew we were going to have new leadership, even if President Trump won. We're obviously going to have new leadership under a Biden administration. And so we've been looking at this. Some of the issues are this. The one that I'm a little more concerned about than others are, because it's a longer term concern, is that military is becoming more and more a family business. Remarkable increase in the percentage of service members who are coming from families of service members. If we go too far with that begins to get to that diversity, that value diversity that I talked about. People have compared this concern to a period of time when some Northeastern police forces were almost all Irish immigrants, and it began to be difficult for other parts of the community to really relate to them and that sort of thing. That's why I encourage you to encourage folks from other walks of life to serve in the military, even just for a while, and only if they're feeling the calling. A couple other things. We're seeing a challenge in attracting enough people who have some of the newer kinds of technical skills that we need. And I'm talking about really particularly cyber and artificial intelligence. We're doing some creative things there. The issue is that it's such a competitive job market for those folks. And secondly, they tend to come from a culture of, purple hair, earrings, tattoos, and things that, at least so far, the military has always, frowned upon. we're getting over that. What we're doing a number of things, including offering these folks the opportunity to serve in a reserve capacity. In fact, I'll give you a tangible example, and this one is working. We're telling some of those great young cyber experts out in Silicon Valley that they can keep doing what they're doing, and we'll bring them aboard, not run them through a boot camp. They're really going to serve within a particular capability. They're not going to carry a rifle and all that. But the way we entice them is we tell them, you'll spend a month with us and you'll get to do something you don't get to do in the civilian world, which is offensive cyber. That gets their attention. And we're seeing some good recruiting result. We also face a problem with expense, and you're going to see over the next 2-3 years real challenges at sort of balancing the expense of the country. I think we are expecting the defense budget to be at best sort of flat. And a lot of that expense is driven by the things that we're doing to make the service attractive to volunteers, the GI Bill, just a number of the benefits that go with serving. And then finally, when the economy is really good, now right now with the pandemic, obviously everything's kind of upside down, but going into just prior to the pandemic with a really strong economy, we were seeing hints, particularly in the largest service, the Army, which just has the challenge of getting so many people every year. They were missing their targets. This was the first time this had happened in a while, and a point of concern. Now it's a little different, but we'll see. We got to keep an eye on it. Let's hope we can maintain a volunteer force.
Well, thank you for that. We only have time for one more question. I really want to do two because President Cannon mentioned General Sherman marching to the sea from here using total war as his new philosophy, of which, when we went into the nuclear bombs in Japan was total war, and it would be a good discussion on how that has evolved to the current day. But I'm really going to, a question coming in from the membership here is talking about one of the issues, one of the things you suggested we might want to talk about, which is some of the military, or at least your personal views on some of the current issues that are under discussion in our environment today. And of course, probably the one on top of most people's mind is the relief of Secretary of Defense Esper, and the timing and the reasoning and that type of stuff. So there've been a lot of turnover in a lot of positions, not to just focus on that one. But any comments on that? We've got about 2 minutes left.
Yeah, great. I'll give you a 2 minute or less answer. I think for the active military folks, and which I'm not, although today I am sitting in uniform with you, I'm confident you'll see all of them continue to act responsibly and apolitically on any front. Their loyalty is to the Constitution, and they will follow whatever lawful orders any President, Secretary of Defense gives them. Military leaders have maintained good relationships. Sometimes there's a media spin that what I'm about to say is not true, but I've been there. I can tell you through a whole series of Democratic and Republican presidential administrations, the military relationships have been good and respectful at the personal level. You're going to have a hard time getting the real views of anybody who's on active duty. You may get them from the retired forces. And so I see generals, admirals, we see, in fact, this is a topic at the War Colleges, whether this is appropriate or not. Some, like Admiral Stavridis, speak pretty publicly about their views. And others, like my friend Joe Dunford, hasn't. And I don't think he ever really will. But I'm confident that the work and the relationships will be good working relationships. The turnover is always difficult, but the uniform leadership is used to working through this. And what I'm hearing from this board I serve on up there is they're already working well with the acting secretary who was put in place, and no big changes right now. And if we have some, then the military carry it out. I will say, assuming that we do have a new administration, the people who are advising the presumed incoming administration are viewed by military folks, uniform folks, as solid. And Michelle Flournoy, Stanley McChrystal, Bill McCraven, Senator Sam Nunn, a number of qualified people who will, I think, give confidence to everybody, no matter where they are on the political spectrum. Final thing I say is your Defense Department tends to be pretty apolitical anyway. We've had two Democratic presidents who have actually appointed Republicans to be the Secretary of Defense, and it's a deliberate effort to keep things that way. And I think that will continue to happen. I have no great concerns about any of it, regardless of the nature of the transitions going on now.
Great, thanks for that. Matter of fact, the answers have been so interesting that President Cannon's given me another couple minutes here to ask you another question, which means I'll go back to somewhat the same questions that people are asking online here. And I brought it up earlier about it used to be total war. Well, it didn't used to be total war, then it became total war, where the civilian population is included in warfare. And then, not till towards the end of World War II, that's the way we did it. We've evolved that, I guess, in a different way. Could you sort of discuss what the philosophy is now? Because you've seen between the civilian and military side, what you wouldn't call it total war. What would you call it?
We prepare still for total war. We prepare for it explicitly to prevent it from having to happen, to demonstrate the capability to do that. And you haven't seen us exercising in recent years. What we've been involved in for the last 2 decades since 9/11 is essentially counterinsurgency work. A lot of in-close, face-to-face work with a very high priority placed on preventing civilian casualties. You probably are aware that we've been under rules of engagement in Iraq and Afghanistan that in my 2 tours of Iraq and 2 tours of Afghanistan, I saw them get progressively tighter, and that's appropriate. No one's ever going to agree on exactly what they are, but the point is the more things progress, the less willing you're going to be to take some risk that by dropping a building with a JDAM bomb, a JDAM type bomb, you're going to be very careful about making sure there are no women, children, anyone other than combatants in there. That's as it should be. But we prepare for total war. And I tell you, the biggest change that's happening in the military, Alec, is changing our direction to be able to do that kind of thing. China is what we call the pacing threat. Now, it's not that we think we're about to go to war with China directly, but they've got incredible capability. They're building rapidly. They make no bones about the fact they aspire to control at least their part of the world, including the Western Pacific, and including a lot of our allies who are deeply concerned about it. So we're shifting to the Pacific. We're adding cyber and AI sophistications to be able to do that. And the services themselves are just in the capabilities. My service, the Marine Corps, was actually the first to do this. We have just in this past 8 months or so redefined pretty radically what we're going to be able to do. We're dropping a lot of the heavy stuff that we've been using in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're going back to being more naval, lighter, and faster. The other services are doing the same. The Air Force, new Air Force Chief of Staff, a brilliant leader, said we needed the same thing. Air Force says all these planes, they have not quite come up with the combined way to penetrate what would be the defenses that China could put up that would be threatening to a number of our friends and really to world peace as well. So big changes coming over the next 4 to 8 years as we pivot our focus from insurgency in the Middle East to what unfortunately is a looming capability potential threat in China in that direction.
I think that's going to be the final question here, and I'll just first of all thank you and being able to address the club from the veterans on Veterans Day, because the connection between the civilian world and the military world is so important in a democracy that we've got to keep ourselves connected. So, President Cannon, back to you.
Well, Alec, well done. Great moderating as always. And General Whitman, I just want to thank you just for your thoughts, deep, rich insights that you bring. And you picking up on that last point you were making, if I could just ask one other question. And It's kind of a big one, I guess, but, see how we can kind of answer it. But, you're in a unique seat in history, right? And with your business and military background, and you look, to oversimplify, but certainly at the end of the last century, capitalism and democracy were riding high. They kind of won against fascism and communism. Over the last 10 years, it's kind of changed a little bit. The dynamic is changing. And certainly, as you were alluding to, China in the East is getting kind of more powerful with their longer system of economic government. How do you see capitalism and liberalism standing right now? Where's it headed, and what do we need to get right?
Yeah, that's a topic on which I would claim no great expertise. There are others on this call who probably have more, but my own view is I am optimistic that we will prevail as the preferred method of organizing and governing societies. Even where we see China trying to expand, you see a number of nations. The one that frequently comes to mind is Vietnam. Vietnam is reaching aggressively in our direction. They don't particularly want to be part of a Chinese model of human organization. So we face challenges. There's no question. It's not the period immediately after the Cold War. And I think the challenges are just beyond military, although they include military capability. They include diplomatic, economic, information. And I think this is just a personal opinion now, this is a policy topic. My belief is that we do well, and particularly for the reasons you say, to remain seriously, intensely engaged with the world, and be careful about retreating into our own hole. The world is just, I think, is beyond the ability for that to really work. Eventually, that would be bad for us. So remaining engaged, reinforcing those engagements, letting partners understand who we are. Even with all the challenges, I believe we still do a really good job at this. We are still a light and a beacon to people around the world, and I'm optimistic that will remain the same. I'd be interested in hearing the thoughts of some of your qualified members on that topic someday.
Well, it would be a rich discussion, and that's the one missing link in all this virtual world. After your talk today, then we could all convene at the stage, and I'm sure you would have 50 people gathered around. We have as many as 200, 250 on these calls, but great answer to a hard question, right? But with leaders like you, and the inspiration you give to the next generation, certainly, as you say, our continued engagement gives us all a fighting chance. So, General Whitman, thank you for joining us today. Very well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Great messaging. We appreciate it.